Hello and greetings everybody, my name's Blossoms and welcome to another Genshin Impact video. And well, I'm back. I was on vacation for a little bit, and during that vacation, Yoimiya and Sayu came out, and I've gotten both of them, as you can obviously see here, and I've gotten some time with my hands on both of them, so we are going to be making content about both of them, as I am enjoying both of them quite a bit, and I'm very excited to bring you guys some different content, whether that be team builds, build guides, and just my general thoughts on the characters, because there has been some controversy amongst them during this time period that they've been out. But today we're going to be talking about the Yoimiya build guide. I've had my time with her and tried a few sets here, and I'm pretty excited to show you guys what I've got to say about her, because there are some downsides to her, but I do still think she's a pretty solid unit, and I'll give you guys my opinion on that as we go along. But first of all, let's go ahead and get into the build. So first and foremost, as you can see, my talents are 8, 6, and 6. Yes, that does say 9 there, but don't forget Child does increase the talent levels of the normal attack by 1. That's just one of its passives there, so it is 9 right now because I have them both in the same party. I really like how they can kind of interact if you just play a little bit smart, so I've been using them together, and plus that free normal attack increase is really good on Yoimiya because of the way she works. But let's go ahead and go over just how she works. So first of all, you have your typical normal attacks and charge attacks. However, her charge attack does have a charge level 2, and that generates up to 3 kindling arrows, and basically those are homing arrows. They don't do like huge damage or anything, but they are extremely forgiving and will hit your target, as they will just hunt it down. And there is one really important thing to note about Yoimiya's normal attacks here, is the fact that her hits have varying degrees of their percentages. So Yoimiya has internal cooldown, and what that means is essentially she can only react a certain amount of times over a certain period of time, and essentially what it boils down to on Yoimiya on her normal attacks here, she's only going to be able to react on her first, third, and fifth hits, if I am remembering correctly, which is actually fairly nice for her because of the fact that her third and fifth hit do hit so hard. You can see it's nearly 150% here and 180% here, and then the first hit's kind of whatever, but the third and fifth hit there are extremely huge, and you'll notice the kindling arrows, as I said here, don't really do that much damage, if really any damage at all. They're pretty weak, and her charge attack is nothing really all that crazy either, so you are going to want to be focusing more on those normal attacks. And speaking of normal attacks, her E skill augments those, the Niwabi Fire Dance. Essentially what this does is you tap it, it surrounds her with some pyro energy, and her normal attacks now deal pyro damage. And they also turn off your charge level 2 attack, which is a little weird. I don't know why they do that. It seems kind of pointless. If anything, I think it should buff them. Just a little weird thing that they decided to do there, but it does turn into pyro damage, and you do get a normal attack and damage bonus there, and that is very strong. It's really good. However, a lot of people have been working out the math, and they've said that the resin really isn't worth it past level 6 on this talent, so do keep that in mind. Apparently, as you can see, the scaling here, we're only getting about 3% here to go to level 7, so a lot of people are saying the resin really isn't worth it to go past level 6 on the Niwabi Fire Dance, so do keep that in mind for all of you wanting to build your Yoimiya, and focusing on her normal attack is going to be your highest priority, followed by her elemental burst and then her E skill. But let's continue into how she operates, and her elemental burst is one of the more interesting aspects of Yoimiya. It does have the issue of kind of missing sometimes because of the way it works. You jump in the air and you kind of shoot at the ground, and sometimes it has a weird angle, or the enemy moves and it goes past you and you miss, but for the most part, it does land on somebody. Generally, when I'm using it, I haven't had too much of a problem with it, but there have been 1 to 2 times that it has missed, so I did want to mention that. And essentially, the way this works is you cast her Q, and it's going to deal a decent amount of pyro damage, nothing too crazy, but it's going to mark that target, and then everybody except Yoimiya who hits the target that is marked, it is going to trigger an AoE pyro damage effect there, and that can occur every 2 seconds. And you can see the scaling on that. You can see the actual pyro AoE there is almost as big as the initial skill hit. So that is important to know, and pretty big on her kit, because it essentially is beginning to tell you that Yoimiya is a character that you're going to want to have on the field for a bit, and then use her burst, and then swap to another character. She is very sub DPS designed, and that's something you're going to want to keep in mind. Kind of similar to Tartaglia, where he has those long cooldowns on his E, so you are going to want another character to swap off to while he's on that cooldown. She's very similar to that, and that's kind of why I enjoy pairing them together, along with some other reasons that I can go over in another video if we would like. But moving on, this is actually a really important one. These next two, the passives, are really important. The Tricks of the Troublemaker, essentially the way this works is her normal attacks, as you go along, increase her pyro damage bonus by 2% on hit. That effect lasts for 3 seconds and can have a maximum of 10 stacks, so you can really start to get up there in terms of the pyro damage bonus. Really nice little augment, but the reason it really matters is, well, one, it's increasing your damage, but then two, it is increasing the attack percentage you're going to be giving your allies. And what I mean by that is going over Summer Night's Dawn here is using Ryukin Saxifrage here, essentially her elemental burst, gains a 10% attack bonus to your teammates, except her. However, based on your stacks of Tricks of the Troublemaker, that can increase it by an additional 1% per stack, and you saw we could get 10 stacks, so you can make it up to 20%, which is pretty darn nice. Essentially a free Noblesse set bonus on Yoimiya if you're using her properly. And then, of course, her last passive here is just 100% chance to refund a portion of materials on decoration, ornament, landscape furnishings. Pretty nice little quality of life thing for some furnishing stuff. As for constellations, I have none. This is a C0 Yoimiya, as are most of my 5 stars. But she does have some pretty solid ones. I don't think they're really all that crazy, though. They're all pretty solid if you want to read through them, but they don't really break her or really take her to another level all that much, in my opinion, so you don't really need to shoot for constellations on this character. Now, getting into the portion that we all really care about, we can talk about her artifact build, and you will see I'm on a split set here, and that's because I'm going to tell you these stats are going to matter more than your set on this particular character. You can run a few things on her. You can run a 4-piece Crimson Witch, you could run a 2-piece Gladiator, 2-piece Crimson Witch, or 2-piece Shiminawas Reminiscence, 2-piece Pyro of the Crimson Witch or whatever, and those are all going to be decent options. But a lot of people are thinking about, well, what about 4-piece Shiminawa's Reminiscence? And I'm going to tell you, I just really don't think it's worth it on her. She doesn't generate a ton of energy, so unless you're pairing her with, like, the new Electro MC or something, I don't think this set is really worth it, just because you do want to get off your Elemental Burst in order for your allies to be dealing more damage when you swap on to them. So taking away from your energy really does hurt Yoimiya, because in the end that takes away more from her damage than you gain from Shiminawa's Reminiscence. People have actually done the math on that, so I can say that with some confidence there. And you are just going to be better off with like a 4-piece Crimson Witch or a 2-piece Gladiator and a 2-piece Crimson Witch. And the only way Shiminawa's, I think, actually edges out the others is if you're basically playing perfectly, and nobody really plays perfectly. So I just really can't say that's worth it, especially because of the fact that Yoimiya requires you to get off all of her attacks in order to make sure she's dealing all of her damage and generating the most energy possible. But yeah, essentially, Shiminawa's Reminiscence, I just don't think it's worth it on her. You're much better on a split set or a 4-piece Crimson Witch, in my opinion. And this is coming from somebody who has a really, decently rolled Shiminawas, at least in terms of crit rate and crit damage. I've got crit rate, crit damage rolls on all pieces of my Shiminawas, essentially. And it's rock solid. It's not bad, and you can definitely deal some really crazy damage in a little burst there, but I think losing out on her elemental burst hurts her a ton. So I've got to say the split set is definitely the way to go on her if that gives you better substats. But if you have like a 4-piece Crimson Witch with better substats, then I would just go with that, whichever suits you a little bit more. But don't lose all hope if you have neither of those. You could easily go for a reaction Yoimiya, to where you go for maybe something like 2-piece Crimson Witch or 2-piece Gladiator, and then you could add on like a 2-piece of the Wanderer's Troop, where you get some of that elemental mastery, to where you can make sure that those elemental reactions that you are proccing are dealing a little bit more damage. I don't think that's optimal, but if you are lacking some of the artifacts that I was just mentioning previously, that is an option for you. Before we get on to the weapon, I do want to note her main stats, of course. Attack percent, pyro damage bonus, crit rate / crit damage is going to be your typical flow for what you're going to want on Yoimiya. I don't really think there's any other way to build her. I have seen some people do some weird stuff with like elemental mastery and trying to get like some kind of crazy overload comp or something, but I definitely don't think that's the most optimal build for your typical DPS Yoimiya. Some people have even been doing some crazy stuff with like a Thundering Fury set to have her at 100% uptime, which is, if you want to do that, then by all means go ahead. I don't think that's optimal either, but it could be pretty fun, and if you want to try those out, then why not? Also, Lava Walker isn't the worst set in the world on her. Not even, there it is. It's not like the worst set in the world on her if you're doing like a pure pyro comp or something, especially. This is probably going to be one of your better ones. But yeah, and as I said, main stats, attack percent, pyro damage bonus, and then crit rate, crit damage. Your substats, of course, you're going to be looking for crit rate and crit damage, but you're also really going to want to be looking for elemental mastery and energy recharge. Those are going to be very important to you just because of the fact that that energy recharge is going to help you get that Q as much as possible on cooldown, so that you can buff your allies as much as possible. But then the elemental mastery is really going to help you just in case some of your reactions get a little mixed up. Like, for example, when I use like Xingqiu and Fischl on the same team with her or something, there's a lot of electrocharge and vaporize and overload going on, and sometimes she's the ones that's proccing the reaction, sometimes they're the ones that are proccing the reaction, so having a little bit of elemental mastery on her definitely doesn't hurt. But as I said, crit rate, crit damage, energy recharge, and then elemental mastery below that is probably going to be your priority. Now, thankfully on Yoimiya, her bow options are, a lot. She has quite a few options. I think, of course, a high refinement rust is going to be one of your best options, unless you have the brand new Thundering Pulse bow or another 5-star bow. Amos bow is also comparable to a 5 refinement rank 5 rust, but it isn't really all that crazy. They're very close. Don't get me wrong. This is a huge stat stick, and that's really carrying it here. And you do get the modifier depending on how far your arrows are coming from, but just for the consistency, I think Rust is a little bit easier to deal with, and you get that 80% normal attack damage increase, and losing the charged attack damage there of 10% might, hurt in some people's eyes, but I don't think it really matters, because as we went over, those little charge level 2 things don't deal that much damage anyway, so they're kind of pointless, and I almost never use them unless it's for utility of just needing to hit like an eyeball or something, or a Dvalin in the sky, and you don't really need those to be dealing that much damage. But if you just cannot live with yourself for sacrificing that charge attack damage, or maybe you don't have a Rust. Rust is a gacha, and it can be pretty hard to get. I wouldn't know the feeling, apparently, because I keep getting them, but Hamayumi is a fantastic option on her. It is definitely going to be doing a little bit less than something like Rust for her main damage, because, of course, most of her damage is coming from her normal attacks, but Hamayumi here does allow her to still gain a normal attack damage bonus, and it can get very comparable to Rust once you start getting those refinements in, and it does boost your charge attack, which is pretty nice, but as I said, doesn't really matter all that much. And we've gone over a video of comparing Rust, Hamayumi, and Amos bow. We put that out last week, I believe. So if you want to check that out, of all these bows and how they kind of compare to one another, feel free to check out that video. But for the most part, all these bows will be good on her, and will be rock solid on her. I'm using Rust because I have an R5 one, and it just looks aesthetic on her. But if you have like even an R4, R3 Rust, and you have an Amos bow, I'd probably use Amos bow over that. But since I have max refinement, I think Rust is kind of the move for me, especially with that aesthetic. All about the aesthetic. Now, don't fret, those aren't the only options. You definitely can use a couple other things. Compound bow isn't the worst thing in the world because it increases your normal attack speed, which is really nice. However, that physical damage bonus isn't really going to be doing anything for you. And not to mention that you get the attack increase as well with a high refinement rank compound bow. Definitely not the best, but definitely not the worst either. Certainly an option. Windbloom's Ode, I really wouldn't use. I don't think that's really worth it. Overall, I think this bow has been pretty lackluster, and I really can't say that's the best. But something like Slingshot here, the 3-star bow, is actually a pretty good option. Because this does increase our damage and has a crit rate substat. It's a 3-star, so you can level it up easily, so you don't have to invest a ton of mats into it. So this is a pretty solid option as well. Don't overlook this if you're missing literally everything else here. The Slingshot is probably a really good option, even probably a little bit better than the compound bow. I haven't done the math on that, so don't quote me on that one. but these in particular are the ones you're going to want to go for. Hamayumi in particular is probably going to be the easiest to grab and most accessible for free-to-play players, so I would recommend this one as an option for the most accessible. Rust being my personal favorite, and then Thundering Pulse is probably going to be the best bow, and then Amos bow a little bit on the same level. All right, so we've mentioned the build. I'll go over the stats here. You see I'm at 1929 here. I've got her attack boosted up. I've got a really solid crit rate of 63 and 121% crit damage. That's a good 2-to-1 ratio. Nothing too insane. You do want higher crit rate on Yoimiya than I think you would traditionally want on a unit, which is nice because her sub or hidden ascension bonus is crit rate, but I think you want it on her more than other characters because all of her damage is coming from very fast normal attacks, so you want to be able to have your crits being consistently procced rather than one big damage number happening, because she doesn't really have a huge damage number modifier to where high crit damage is really going to benefit her. So I think higher crit rate is going to be very important on her. And then of course a little bit of pyro damage bonus there, a little bit of energy recharge, and nothing too bad there. Elemental Mastery only at 58. I wish it could be a little higher because she is fun to pair with some overload units, and you can do some vaporized comps with like Xing Shou, and that's really nice. But now that we've gone over all that, before we get into the showcase, I will talk about some of the problems with Yoimiya. Alrighty, and now that we've gone over her kit, let's go ahead and talk about a couple of her issues, because there has been a lot of discussion on Yoimiya in the community. A lot of people have just been saying she's trash, and honestly, that sentiment is just wrong. She's a rock-solid DPS. Is she as broken as somebody like Ganyu or Hu Tao? Absolutely not, but not every character really needs to be. She does solid damage, and she can get through all of the content in the game fairly easily, but I mean, to be fair, you can get through most of the content in the game with like a physical DPS Chi-Chi. However, Yoimiya definitely doesn't struggle as much as like a physical DPS Chi-Chi. She just isn't as good as somebody like Hu Tao or Ganyu, or Zhao or something, but she is still really solid. And I think a lot of people are sleeping on the whole sub DPS aspect that she really can bring to the table, similar to how Tartaglia is, where he's a solid DPS, but he's a really good sub DPS as like a character to swap to, and that's like his big strength there. And I really do enjoy both of them on the same team. It's just pretty fun. I don't think it's the most optimal, but it is very fun. Overall, I think she's really good. The only thing that I would really ask is probably increasing the scaling on her E, just because it's really weird how little you get as you get past level 6. It just really isn't that much. And then maybe adding some sort of some more AoE to her would be really good, because her biggest issue is the fact that she's basically only single target, and that isn't the biggest concern in Genshin Impact right now. But for the most part, she's still rock solid and is going to obliterate most of the competition. And if you really need the AoE, you can just pair her with like a Beto Q or something. It's going to chain to everybody and kill everybody. And she is really fun in like an overload comp like that. So I'd recommend playing her like that. I think it's really fun as well. And one of the biggest gripes I think I have with Yoimiya is just the fact she doesn't pair super well with a lot of the characters that we have been using. Of course, Xing Shou is going to be really good on her. Xing Shou is really good on anybody. Zhongli is going to be really good on her, but like, that goes for pretty much every character in the game. Somebody like Fischl's pretty cool as well, but like, there isn't somebody that accentuates what she's trying to do super well, like we've kind of seen in the past. She pairs pretty well with a couple characters, but like the fact that she needs a shield, and there isn't really a shield that just works with her too well. And what I mean by she needs a shield is the fact that you really do need to be getting off this 3rd and 5th hit to make sure you're dealing solid DPS on her. And so to make sure that's happening, you kind of need a shield, because you can't dodge mid-combo there and continue your combo. And the shields we have provided for her aren't really all that optimal for her. You could use something like a Geo Shield. That's okay. Of course, somebody like Zhongli is definitely going to be the best shielder for it. Honestly, it's definitely like the best shielder for her. Noelle is solid as well. And that's okay if you want to use those Geo characters, but if you're trying to use like an elemental reaction team, your elemental shield options are only really Xinyan and Diona still, and neither of those really pair with her. So it's just a little wonky right now, but I think as we go along and we get some other, more characters with like elemental shields and stuff, or that can just like pair better with her kit, she's going to be a much stronger option than she is already. But don't get me wrong, she's still a really strong option now, and we're actually going to show that off. Let's go ahead and mess with a boss or two just to show how strong she can actually be, how much damage she can actually do without using somebody like Bennett. We're just going to be using her and Xingqiu to show just like a baseline, very, very common version of, what people are going to be using Yoimiya for. I personally like using her in something like with like Fischl and like Xingqiu or something, trying to get Overload and Electrocharge. I think that's really fun, but most people are just going to be pairing her with like Xingqiu and like a couple other units, so we're just going to be using the both of them. All right, so we're going to bully the Cryo Regicide just a little bit, and as I said, we're only going to be using Xingqiu and Yoimiya, but we are going to use Bennett to go ahead and get down the shield here, and do just keep in mind that has increased Yoimiya's attack by like 25% with the Pyro Resonance there, so she's at like 2100 attack instead of 1900, so just so you guys know, I'm not like trying to fool you or anything. And this is kind of the damage you can expect here, and you notice that third and fifth hit are dealing really big numbers, so like 18k there, 22k, and that's with some of the Vaporize, but those are going to be your big number hits, and you see we just deleted the boss. I didn't have to do anything except hit left click. It was pretty Oonga Boonga, and I kind of like that about her. But let's go ahead and go to a boss with a little bit more health, and let's go ahead and actually use a general team comp with it. All right, since this boss essentially forces you to use a shield character, we got Zhongli on the team. Otherwise, I probably would have had somebody like Fischl or Beto there, just because I really like the whole Electrocharge and Overload thing going on. That you can end up doing with that, but having Tartaglia on the team is kind of pivotal here, just because I did want to show off like kind of a more team comp oriented situation here, to where we actually show some of the strengths of Yoimiya, and this is going to be kind of what we need to do here, where we are dealing our typical big damage here, and with somebody like, oh no, wait, I didn't actually cast Xingqiu's ult there. Hold on. All right. Well, let's redo our damage here. Get that started. Get Niwabi Fire Dance or whatever. And you see we're dealing our typical big damage. And the thing is, when this ends, this is like the beautiful part to Yoimiya, is that you can just sit there and use her Q, then swap to somebody like Tartaglia and, start going off. Getting some Vaporize procs in between because he's marked there. You saw we got a little bit of a Vaporize there. And I just find that a little bit fun, and that's kind of how you want to orient your team comps around her, is essentially to where you can accent another DPS character pretty well when you do that inevitable swap off. As you can see here, the damage is pretty solid, but as you see, I'm also needing to dodge a bit, which is definitely hurting some of my damage numbers. You see, I wasn't getting off that like 21k Vaporize as much as we might usually do there, and that can really hurt you, And you can kind of just keep going into it, and one of my favorite things is to like swap the child and then get like a nice Vaporize or something, which is pretty sweet. And we got an achievement there? What was that? Fine, I'll do it myself. Defeat permanent without reflecting his permanent. I guess we weren't really paying attention or needing to, just reflect that. So that's kind of interesting. But yeah, that's kind of what I want to show you, is that you can swap off to another character that's really going to be able to take advantage of that. Q aspect with the increased attack, somebody like Tartaglia is great for that, but you can use plenty of other characters. I just really like Tartaglia. The problem with having like Tartaglia and Xingqiu on the same team is that you can't really get the Vaporize when you swap back to like Tartaglia off of Yoimiya, because there's probably some leftover Hydra from Xingqiu, and that's a little bit annoying, but this is just kind of like an example there. But yeah, that's pretty much going to be it for the Yoimiya build guide. I tried to go over as much as I could regarding her, and I do plan to have some Sayu content out very, very soon. She has some pretty interesting avenues you can take her, and I want to be able to explore a couple of them before I actually make the video, but I did want to get this one out to you guys. Let me know your guys' thoughts on Yoimiya, how you might want to buff her, or if you think she's perfectly fine the way she is. I think she's very, very strong. She could just use maybe a slight buff, but I absolutely love her regardless, and I do plan to have her on plenty of my teams. Anyway, thanks for watching the video. I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day. My name's Blossoms, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.